Ladies and gentlemen, in this Red Gaming Technical video, we're going to be further discussing Valve. Now, Valve are one of those companies who are synonymous with PC gaming. Particularly, of course, we have things such as, well, Steam. But one of their major points that I think many people are just amazed with, astounded with, is the fact that they have a flat structure within the company. And this basically means that there is not really a boss of such. And this basically means that although many people consider Gabe Newell to be the boss of Valve, he's not really in many people's eyes. And in fact, he's considered more of a level employee. This allows each person at Valve to basically pursue what they consider to be their passion, and people could basically work on what they feel that would be best for them to work on, and they can help those who they like the projects of, and so forth and so forth. However, there was a series of layoffs, back in February of 2013, and one of those who was let go of was Jeri Ellsworth. Now, recently she's made some comments that were going very into depth of just what the Valve's employee handbook was about, and what she said was, despite the fact that officially there is no management within the company, there is not a management structure effectively. There is, however. In other words, there is like an underlying management. Now, her exact quote was, "There is actually a hidden layer of powerful management structure within the company." And she even went as far as to say, and it felt like high school a lot of the time. Now, she, along with 4 others, was let go of, and they were working on augmented reality technology. Now, she actually says that their department was actually starved of resources, and basically the old-timers, the popular people within the company, were blocking her attempt at hiring a machinist who would cost the company about $40,000 a year to manufacture the machine parts, because they felt they wouldn't, and I quote, fit into Valve's structure. And she says, "When I first started at Valve, I was skeptical they would stick with it. I had other contract work I was doing, so I really didn't want to commit to Valve, but they started pumping me up, telling me how I'd have all of this control of the hardware group and be able to form it how I'd like, so I started to drink the Kool-Aid." You've probably seen the Valve handbook, which is a very idealized view of what Valve is like. A lot of those things are true. It is a pseudo-flat structure where in small groups you are all peers and make decisions together. But the one thing I found out the hard way is there are actually a hidden layer of powerful management structure within the company, and it felt a lot like high school. There are popular kids that have acquired all the power, and then there are the troublemakers, and then there's everyone in between. Everyone in between is okay. But then there are the troublemakers who want to make the difference. I was struggling trying to build this hardware team and move the company forward. We were having a difficult time recruiting folks. We would interview talented people, but they would be rejected by their old-timers at Valve as not fitting into the culture. I wouldn't say the numbers, but there were very, very few folks in the hardware department. We were very understaffed by 100 times for what we needed to do. She even spoke a little bit about the day she was fired, and it wasn't a particularly pleasant experience, of course. And she actually found out, apparently from a colleague, rather than from anyone in position. For example, Gabe. She said, "If I'm sounding bitter," and I am, I really, really am bitter, because they promised me the world and then stabbed me in the back. What I learned from Valve is I don't think it works. You give people complete latitude with no checks and balances, and it's just human nature that they're going to try and minimize the work they do and maximize the control they have. Valve was really good at hiring the guitarists, we would say. All us hardware folks, we went out and got the best makers and creators, but we were all the guitarists. We didn't have the person who would sit there and assemble things for us. Even getting a tech for around the lab was impossible. That's where a layer of management can help organize. Now, in the end, Newell himself gave Cast AR to Ellsworth, and she is now free to use that however she would like to, and indeed they're going to be planning a Kickstarter of some description or another in the not-too-distant future. And she also remains really good friends with a lot of the people that she left behind, and says, I should frame this with, I have a lot of friends still at Valve. There are some great people there, especially in the hardware team, who are really close-knit. We were probably the hardest working people in the company. We don't usually talk about personal matters for a number of reasons. There seems to be an unusual amount of speculation about some of the recent changes here, so I thought I'd take that unusual step of addressing them. And no, we aren't cancelling any projects. No, we aren't changing any priority of the projects we're discussing. No, this isn't about Steam or Linux or hardware, or insert game name here, and we aren't going to discuss why anyone in particular is or is not working here, says Gabe Newell as a closer. So, yeah, as I said, Ellsworth herself remains good friends. Gabe doesn't really want to comment on the issue, which you can somewhat understand. Now, my own personal thoughts on this, it kind of makes sense. I mean, this is the problem. When you have game designers, when you have people who want to put out these titles, you can have someone with all the ideas in the world, and don't get me wrong, people with ideas obviously are those that drive the creative vision. However, I don't give a crap about what your ideas are if they're not actually physically able to be implemented, if they're not down on paper, if they are not then being transformed into something that is workable, usable, and meaningful. What is the point? What is the issue? The problem is as well, as she herself said, the bottom line is, when you have a group of people, whatever group that is, whether it's 20 people, whether it's 100 people, whether it's 1,000 people, you will always have people who are the more popular ones, those who have the most influence. And it's a very sad fact, but the more popular you are, the more influence you have. And it's a bottom line of, a lot of people will do what the popular person wants you to do, even if it's not necessarily the right thing to do or the best thing to do. And so, obviously, as she says, she's understaffed and so on. Now, I'm not putting Valve on blast. I'm not coming across negatively on Valve. I actually love Valve. But I'm also not privy to how Valve works internally, apart from, of course, your leaked document here or there. And so, it doesn't take a particular genius to know that there probably would be some issues with this. Now, it does, in theory, and also in practice, of course, inspire and increase productivity, or should I say creativity. However, creativity and productivity aren't necessarily the same thing. And maybe if there was a more traditional management structure in place, we'd actually have Half-Life 3 by now. Not bitter at all, I'm just teasing, guys, of course. But it is a testament, really, to how the gaming industry works. And as she said, there are a lot of lead guitarists at Valve. In other words, those who consider themselves to be the star or trying to do their projects or whatever. But it's really, at the end of the day, if you to actually look at how many people create a game, it's just, alright, let's actually use a music for a better example. Okay, and I'll just use rock and metal because I'm much more familiar with it than what I am any other type of music. But let's talk about concert. Okay, so you have your major guitarist, whatever band you happen to like, you have your singer, and then of course they are there to play, and obviously their performance is extremely good. They may or may not write their own songs, but let's assume, for the purposes of this, that they do write their own songs. Regardless, to actually set the stage up, they are most likely, unless they're a smaller band or really, really nice, not going to be helping set up their own stages. They're also not going to be helping with the lighting, the the speakers and everything else. Obviously, they'll do sound checks and so forth, but they're not going to be setting out all the seats and so forth. And so to put that show on, there was a hell of a lot of work that needs to be done, right down to security in the grounds, to make sure that people aren't trying to get in without tickets, or say starting fights or whatever. And all of these things are required to work in harmony for the event to be really good. And it's the same in games as well. There are everyone from beta testers and play testers, all the way down to artists, all the way down to programmers. And sometimes, I'm not going to lie, I do a little bit of website programming and stuff like that in my job alone. And sometimes IT tasks are just boring. It's that simple. Not all tasks are. Sometimes it's really fun. Sometimes it's really creative. Sometimes it's really enjoyable. Sometimes you get the eureka moment, which is an incredible feeling. The problem is, those eureka moments, oftentimes, you realize that now you've got to do a ridiculously laborious process to actually implement those. And oftentimes that can actually be really either boring or just takes a lot of time. And obviously, this could be a problem because, well, someone has to do the work. It's that simple. Now, as I said, I don't claim to know just how well this works in practice at Valve because I don't work there. And obviously they have been doing things such as Steam, they have been doing things such as Half-Life, the Source engine, and a lot more, and it's not as though they're struggling as a company. And so you can argue that obviously it seems to be working for them at some level. The problem is just how much of this secret power, as she decides to call it, is really there. It's unknown. However, it doesn't really take a genius to know that there are going to be popular people in Valve, as they're going to be unpopular people, or people who, as they said, make trouble or whatever. It's just human nature. Regardless, I do wish her well in her work, and I do mean that. And also wish Valve, of course, good luck as well. Because sometimes, you know what, you just don't fit in somewhere as well. Sometimes you just don't get on with a certain group of people. I'm sure you've had that. Sometimes you may even get on with someone to begin with. But then you realise that ultimately, deep down, your two goals are different. Maybe they work at a different pace. Maybe they have different life visions. And therefore, you know what? You have to just go your separate ways. This is just sometimes how business, how life works. Regardless, hopefully we'll get further comments on this. I think Valve are one of the more mysterious entities out there in gaming. I know, obviously, it's not like Capcom, for example, are super open about how everything works, but they're more of a traditional company. With Valve, there is this layer of mysticism there, which is kind of interesting. I think a couple of other companies have it as well. Blizzard, especially back in the day, Bullfrog used to have it, of course, he says, sadly, and a couple of other companies as well. But Valve definitely have probably the biggest. So anyway, guys, this has been a bit of an itsy-bitsy video, but hopefully you've enjoyed it. Regardless, I will see you soon. Don't forget, there is a competition up, or should be up, in the next couple of minutes anyway, depending on what order these videos go up, depending on YouTube's processing times, I suppose, which are giving away a couple of PC games, and also a thank you to all of the subscribers. That will be until, he says, just to point this out, until the 17th of July. So if you're watching that before then, this video before then, you should definitely check that giveaway. Anyway, take care and bye for now.